the two concessionaires are preparing and how the government is addressing the demand side.
Forecasters say expect lesser rainfall with the onset of summer that may have an impact again on water supply in Metro Manila. In a statement, weather forecaster Benison J. Estareja says a weakening La Nina which comes from the cold front will result in near normal rainfall, including the areas of Angat in Bulacan and La Mesa Dam in Quezon City. The probability of a weather disturbance this month is 0 to 1. Water level in Angat Dam in Bulacan is now 17 meters below the ideal 212 meters.
Posible yung shortage natin kasi medyo March pa lang tayo, medyo mababa na. Considering na ilang buwan pa ito. Although pumasok tayo sa wet season by July, pero hindi pa naman kaagad naapektuhan itong Angat.
Concessionaires and the NWRB also observe a high demand for water for sanitation this time of the pandemic. Concessionaires Manila Water and Maynilad say they are tapping other sources to augment supply.
Tinayo at fully operational na yung ating Cardona Water Treatment Plant dyan sa Rizal, kung saan kumukuha ng tubig ito sa Laguna Lake.
Meron kaming kinukonstruct na apat na modular treatment plants. So, magpuproduce ng additional supply, kukuha siya ng tubig mula sa mga katabing ilog,
Angat Dam also supplies the irrigation needs of nearby provinces, so regulators are making sure farmlands will get their fair share, mindful of the need to conserve water.
Sa ngayon po ay yung patuloy naman po yung call natin sa mga ibang ahensya ng pamahalaan sa ibang probinsya na mag-practice ng responsible use of water. Although specific kasi yung requirement natin dito sa Metro Manila.
Another scheme to induce rain is cloud seeding in water reservoir areas, which the government usually conducts during summer. Stanley Gaete, CNN Philippines.
Following yesterday's President Duterte adopts nuclear energy as a power source 3 months before he steps down. In an executive order, he tasked the Nuclear Energy Program Interagency Committee to look into the possibility it was unused for decades. Now, the plant was supposed to generate 650 megawatts of electricity. The Energy Department thinks now is a good time to revive talks on nuclear energy.
Ang bago, walang problema, di ba? Pero yung BNPP kasi nandyan na yan, so energy security, makakatulong siya. So yes, yan. Safety, nag-recommend ang mga, pwede pa yan, sabi nila. So we have to validate that. Safe ba siya talaga? Cost, pag i-rehabilitate ba natin yan, competitive ba sa cost? O kaya magiging mahal din ang labas, mas mura ang bago kaysa rehabilitate mo, di ba?
Undersecretary Erguiza admits the issue may be polarizing with a distant memory of the Chernobyl and Fukushima disasters after accidents involving nuclear reactors there wiped out communities. Now, a group of students is dismayed over the Commission on Higher Education's temporary suspension of scholarship applications for incoming freshmen. The National Union of Students of the Philippines says this will affect the plans of thousands relying on grants, especially in this pandemic. The group also questions the move, with CHED still accepting applications for a tuition increase.
We are conducting consultations with students over the country. We have received reports that many students are not applying now for the next semester due to financial problems.
CHED announced Thursday that it is facing budget issues over its student financial assistance programs. CNN Philippines is reaching out to the Commission to explain its memorandum, but we have yet to receive a response. Now, a fourth dose or a second booster shot for senior citizens and persons with underlying illnesses is in the pipeline. Pandemic Task Force Advisor Dr. Ted Herbosa said the government is now reviewing the recommendation of the vaccine experts panel.
Ito ngayon ay pinasa na sa ating technical advisory group at saka all experts at hintayin na lang natin kung maaprubahan ito ng ating IATF para ma-implementan na.
Meanwhile, those aged 17 and below are not yet recommended to get boosted. Health Undersecretary Maria Rosario Vergere says there is still no evidence to support the pediatric booster. The health department reports 853 new COVID-19 cases. This is the country's lowest daily count so far this year. It is also the third straight day the tally fell below 1,000. Active cases are at 50,230, the lowest since January 5. 232 more people lost their lives, while over 1,000 others recovered. The positivity rate is also below 5% for the fourth straight day. Ahead on Newsnight, Ukraine is accusing Russia of committing a terror attack after a fire at its largest nuclear power plant. CNN's Atika Schubert gives us an update on the ground live from Lviv. And is PAGCOR ready to suspend e-sabong operations as dozens of cockfighting enthusiasts remain missing? Stay tuned.
DXKP Pagadian, ang inyong Radyo Ronda RPN. RPN, Radio Philippines Network. Radio Philippines Network. Live to the world, pinaagi sa FB page, karon mag-download na. Pinaagi sa Google Play, og Apple Store, YouTube, og Twitter. Alang sa mas ipakuskan ng mga balita, komentaryo, kasayuran, og kalingawan. Ang mas ipakuskan ng inyong Radyo Ronda Network. Kapisanan ng mga broadcaster ng Pilipinas.
Welcome back to Newsnight, where we go above and beyond the headlines. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is accusing Russia of committing a terror attack. He believes Russian troops intentionally fired at Ukraine's largest nuclear power plant. Zelensky called on world leaders to stop Russia before, quote, this becomes a nuclear disaster. Russia said the attack on Ukraine is going according to plan as it threatened a third world war that could be nuclear. Let's bring in CNN senior international correspondent Atika Schubert live from Lviv in Ukraine. Atika, an official saying there may be casualties from the incident at the nuclear plant this morning. What does this fire have to do with the threat of a nuclear war?
Well, there were a lot of concerns. This is Europe's largest nuclear power plant, and fighting had been ongoing around the plant for some time now, and there was deep concern that there could be a rocket attack directly on the plant. We do know a fire broke out there that has since been put out, however. There have been, and now we understand that Russian troops have taken control of the plant. There were some casualties there, mostly Ukrainian military who were trying to defend the plant. So far, it seems that the nuclear power plant is secure. They are still checking for radiation levels there. There were some comparisons to the Chernobyl nuclear disaster, of course, that happened in the 80s, but that has not... It seems unlikely that this would be the same kind of scenario. It's a different kind of plant, different kind of technology. It's a much safer design, but still deeply concerning that any kind of fighting was happening near it.
Atika, the attack follows a second round of talks that what happened to that? No breakthrough again, and there's a lot of concern about this warning from Russia about a third world war.
Yeah, I mean, nobody expected a big breakthrough in the second round of ceasefire talks. They did, however, agree in principle to some sort of humanitarian corridor from certain besieged cities. So this, in theory, would mean that both sides would stop fighting to allow citizens or residents of a city to get out safely and to allow food, medicine, and other emergency supplies to come in. But we don't have any concrete details of how this would work or when it would be in place and for what cities. As for Russia threatening the possibility of using its nuclear arsenal, they have stepped up what they would call the alert level for its deterrence weapons, which do include nuclear missiles. However, I should point out there are still several more emergency levels above it. So I think it's deeply concerning, but no need for panic at this point. But the very fact that Russian President Vladimir Putin seems to be willing to use nuclear weapons as some sort of a deterrent, I think is very unsettling, to say the least.
Which key cities are now under Russian control?
Well, Kherson is the only city that appears to be fully under Russian control at this point. Although when I say fully under Russian control, keep in mind that the Ukrainian residents there have actually directly been confronting Russian troops and saying that they refuse to be occupied by the Russian military. We're also watching the city of Mariupol, which is next to Kherson. It's slightly further east, but also along that southern corridor of the country. It has been surrounded by Russian troops now for more than 2 days. Water and power have been cut off. They're running very low on food and other supplies, and there's deep concern that they need to get residents out of there and get them to safety as soon as possible. It's interesting, the location of these two cities. They're next to each other along the southern coast of Ukraine, and there appears to be a strategy by the Russian offensive to take this southern coast, possibly even the Ukrainian port city of Odessa. If Russia can control that southern corridor, it would cut Ukraine off from the Black Sea, further isolating the country. So, we're watching the situation very closely to see how far the Russian troops advance there.
CNN senior international correspondent Atika Schubert reporting live from Lviv in Ukraine. Back here at home, President Duterte reiterating the Philippines will remain neutral for now despite the intensifying attacks on Ukraine.
We stay neutral. But reality tells me that in the end, we'll just have to select which side we would be. Bahala na yung magpatayan sila doon. Huwag lang magamit ng nuclear device. Because talo na tayong lahat. Pati tayo damay. I just pray to God that this will not really go out of control.
The country earlier voted in favor of a United Nations resolution condemning the Russian invasion. The government says it is ready to accept refugees from Ukraine. A team from the European Union concludes its monitoring mission to Manila today and says the country should take steps to address concerns recently raised by EU lawmakers. The group sees an urgent need for the government to look into the Duterte administration's drug war, alleged extrajudicial killings, red tagging of human rights defenders, and supposed restrictions in media and free speech. The EU says the country should keep its commitments to continue enjoying the trade privileges of the GSP Plus scheme, which allows for the duty-free entry of thousands of Philippine products to the continent. The current scheme extended until 2034. Petitioners calling on the Commission on Elections to immediately resolve the last pending disqualification case against presidential candidate Bongbong Marcos. The group Pudno Nga Ilocano filed an urgent motion for the COMEX's former 2nd Division to settle the petition filed in December. The group said it has been 45 days since it filed the final arguments in the case, but the COMEX gave Commissioners Socorro Inting and Ray Bulay until April 14 to decide, following the retirement of 3 officials, Chairman Sharif Abbas, as well as Commissioners Rowena Guanzon and Antonio Co.
We understand that there are only 4 commissioners at the moment, but we believe that is no excuse for the COMELEC to delay resolution of the petitions for disqualification especially so that election time come May is fast approaching.
Inting, who is now COMELEC's acting chairman, said the decision will be out before the elections. Like the other junked petitions against Marcos, the pending disqualification case argues the former senator should not be allowed to run for president after being found guilty of not filing his income tax returns. Now, on the campaign trail, some presidential candidates woo voters in their rivals' bailiwicks and the provinces where they lost in previous elections. Anjo Alimario has that story.
Supporters of Vice President Leni Robredo are out to prove that Cavite is no Marcos country. Governor John Vic Remulla had vowed to deliver 800,000 votes for Robredo's rival, former Senator Bongbong Marcos. But kakamping Caviteños are willing to prove him wrong.
Kasi unang-una, mga Caviteño, may sarili kaming pag-iisip. Pangalawa, maraming kabataan sa Cavite na uhaw na sa pag-asa, uhaw na sa magandang kinabukasan ng Pilipinas. Obviously, apparently, hindi si Marcos ang makakapagbigay nun sapagkat siya ay magnanakaw, sinungaling.
They even made into a tarp this deleted tweet from Remulla showing Robredo leading in his own informal survey on Twitter. The Vice President is a distant second in recent pre-election surveys, but Robredo is not at all discouraged. With 2.3 million votes up for grab here in Cavite, she says she's even more inspired to work hard. Robredo lost to Marcos in Cavite by over 150,000 votes in 2016, but she's hopeful this time around.
Nakikita natin, grabe yung ginagawa ng mga volunteers dito. So wala ito noong 2016. Noong 2016 walang ganito. Kaya very hopeful tayo na magiging mas maganda yung showing natin dito ngayon compared to 2016.
Marcos, meanwhile, is in Robredo's bailiwick, the Bicol region, in Sorsogon in particular. This is the first time Marcos set foot in Bicolandia since the start of the campaign period. His caravan in the province is the shortest he has ever done so far. Fewer people also line the streets compared to his visit in other areas.
Sabi ko, ay hindi natin baluarte ang Sorsogon. Kaya tignan natin kung anong maging audience.
Just yesterday, Senator Panfilo Lacson was also in Sorsogon. Governor Chis Escudero even drove Lacson and his running mate Tito Soto around the city. The region overwhelmingly voted for Robredo in 2016, but Lacson is convinced he has a fighting chance.
There's no such thing as somebody's country, so to speak. Even the so-called Solid North, minsan meron ding crap, ang Solid North. Wala talaga solid. It's really up to the voters.
Up north, the tandem of Isko Moreno and Willie Ong would voters in Isabela and Cagayan. With them, a senatorial candidate, Jan Castraciones, who first floated the Isko Moreno-Sara Duterte tandem. But it appears all's well between him and Ong.
Kita ko magaling talaga si Secretary Jan na marami siya na ibigay na lupa.
You know, Doc Willie is a very good man. Napakabuting tao ni Doc Willie. At saka makikita mo sa kanya na hindi siya yung taong talagang nag-i-impose ng kanyang gusto sa tao.
Anjo Alimario, CNN Philippines.
Meanwhile, President Duterte will begin campaigning for the national and local candidates he's supporting on March 25. The PDP Laban faction of Alfonso Cusi says Mr. Duterte will take on a more proactive role as chairman of the ruling party by promoting its more than 6,500 bets. But Mr. Duterte, presidential candidate. Well, COMELEC ramping up its voter education initiatives 66 days before the Filipino votes. COMELEC officials signed an agreement with poll watchdog Democracy Watch on informing the youth and first-time voters. Over the next 2 months, the group will tap universities for information campaigns.
For Democracy Watch, like I said earlier, I'll reiterate that we aren't taking sides in our advocacy. Instead, what we do is we want to push the issues. We want to highlight facts and documents and videos that show the facts of what actually happened in the history of the Philippines. So, isa na nga po dun is yung disinformation na nakikita po natin na very rampant ngayon pong election season, not only during elections, even before. And that's why po we've incorporated this issue into the voter education program.
Meanwhile, COMELEC addressed criticism from several camps, including the Office of the Solicitor General on its partnership with Rappler for voter education efforts. The poll body says the online news company will not have access to restricted information.
With respect to Rappler, we received an advisory from the Solicitor General, and we are still studying our options because, I would like to emphasize that COMELEC is a constitutional body and an independent.
A controversial personality surfaces at a Senate hearing into abductions linked to e-sabong, or remote betting on live cockfighting matches. As the search for missing cockfight enthusiasts continues, is PAGCOR ready to suspend e-sabong operations? Amor Santos reports.
Gaming tycoon Atong Ang draws the victim card on Friday as he faced the Senate investigation on the disappearances of more than 30 cockfight enthusiasts. Several of them were last seen in 3 arenas operated by Ang's e-sabong company, Lucky 8 Star Quest. Ang claims there's a conspiracy against him, but he did not go into detail. Instead, he requested an executive session with senators.
Ang Lucky 8, parang ginano nyo na guilty eh. Hindi naman trial by publicity, papatunayan ko sa inyo na may conspiracy rito. Okay? Wala kaming kinalaman dyan.
Kaya nakasentro dito sa kumpanya ninyo yung investigasyon, hindi nakasentro kay Bong Pineda, hindi nakasentro doon sa ibang mga licensee because yung tatlong mga sabungan kung saan last known location ng mga missing victims, doon sila nalulukit bago sila nawawala.
During the public hearing, Ang disclosed the staggering amount of money his company makes. Gross bets range from 1 to 2 billion pesos per day for a total of 30 to 60 billion pesos monthly. Of this amount, Lucky 8 gets a 5% commission, or at least 3 billion pesos. About half of it is given to the agents, while the remaining 1.5 billion pesos go to company revenue and operating fund. To date, e-sabong brings in a total of 640 million pesos to the government monthly, according to PAGCOR. It's a valuable reason why the state regulator is hesitant to suspend e-sabong operations, despite the Senate request for a timeout amid the ongoing probe. PAGCOR Chair Andrea Domingo says other operators also appealed for a quote-unquote fair and just treatment, saying they committed no violations. Domingo says PAGCOR needs time to study the consequences but will hit the brakes if ordered by President Duterte.
Hindi po namin ayaw suspendihin. Kailangan lang po talaga namin ng konting proteksyon mula kay Presidente. Kasi nga po, hindi namin kayang sagutin yung gagawin ng COA at yung mga kasong pwedeng ikaso sa amin. Kasi po malaking kawalan nga ng pera, loss of revenue, may mga auditing rules po dyan at may mga contractual obligations kami. Pag po sinabi sa amin ni Presidente, sige, at least po meron kami proteksyon. Ang sabi, culture yan ng sabong eh. Kahit daw dun sa... Hindi ko po alam ang sabong eh. Kahit daw doon sa mga local na sabong, pag may nanghuling ng bidadaya, talaga daw pong pinaparusahan.
Months into the search, families of those missing continue to hope against hope, including the mother of a 14-year-old boy who disappeared from a cockpit in Laguna.
Nag-birthday po siya noong January 5. Dumating na lang po ako, sabi ng mga kapatid na sinama daw po sa sabungan na yun.
Kinikita natin sa langit pag hindi natin makita dito. Ha?
Amor Santos, CNN Philippines.
Still ahead, it is the Lakers versus the Warriors yet again. Which team topped the list for most NBA jerseys sold in the Philippines? And we give you details on the much-awaited P-pop convention with the likes of SB19 and BGYO set to perform. Keep it here on CNN Philippines.
RPN DXKP Pagadian. Ang inyong Radyo Ronda. RPN Radio Philippines Network. Radio Philippines Network. Live to the world. Pinaagi sa FB page. Karon, mag-download na. Pinaagi sa Google Play o Apple Store, YouTube o Twitter. Alang sa mas kipakuskan ng mga balita, komentaryo, kasayuran o kalingawan. Ang mas kipakuskan ng inyong Radyo Ronda. Member, kapisanan ng mga broadcaster ng Pilipinas.
Welcome back to CNN Philippines. In basketball, which NBA player won Filipinos' hearts in the first half of the season? Now, if we were to base that on jersey sales, Stephen Curry of the Golden State Warriors emerges as the most popular. The two-time league MVP topped the NBA Store Philippines list based on what was sold from October 20 last year to January 31st. Ranking second is the Los Angeles Lakers' LeBron James. But Pinoy Laker fans are still going strong, with the squad topping the list of team merchandise sales locally. The Warriors came second, followed by the Nets, the Mavericks, and then the Bucks. And this Sunday, the triathlon capital of the country will welcome Asia's first full-length Ironman race in 2 years. 912 triathletes, including 868 local participants, will compete in the Subic Bay town. The race will feature a grueling 3.8-kilometer swim, 180-kilometer bike, and a 42-kilometer run. Also taking place is the 70.3 half-distance race. Participants must present a negative RT-PCR test 48 hours upon entry to Subic Bay. The top 45 finishers in each group will get a chance to qualify for the Ironman World Championships in Kona, Hawaii, and St. George, Utah. Now, in music, ticket prices and the seat plan for one of the biggest nights in Filipino pop are out. On your screens are the details for this year's P-Pop convention to be held in the Smart Araneta Coliseum on April 9 and 10. Tickets range from 1,000 pesos to 5,500. Fans who can't make it physically may also avail of passes for live streaming. Some artists taking the stage are Billboard chart toppers SB19, fellow boy group BGYO, and girl groups Beanie and MNL 48. You can grab your tickets by Sunday, March 6. And that is it for now. Join me again on News.ph at 7 p.m. I'm Pia Ontiveros for Newsnight, where we go above and beyond the headlines.
This program is brought
Autism awareness is growing rapidly. Unfortunately, many still hold beliefs about autism that are untrue. This lack of understanding can make it difficult for people to receive the proper support they need. Autism spectrum disorder is a developmental disability that can cause challenges in communication, social skills, behavior, and learning. The term spectrum refers to a wide range of symptoms and severity. While there's no cure for this condition, intensive and early treatment can make a huge difference in people's lives. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and we bring you the knowledge and care you need and deserve. You're watching NetTalk Health Talk only on CNN Philippines. Misconceptions about autism can make people living with this condition feel isolated and lonely. Our guest today will help us understand this condition as well as dispel some of the misconceptions or misinformation surrounding it. With us is Dr. Catherine Baltazar Braganza, who is a neurodevelopmental pediatrician from USC Hospital and the Philippine Children's Medical Center. Also joining us is Ms. Mona Magno-Veluz. She is the National President of Autism Society Philippines. Now, let's go through some of the more common misconceptions about autism. I'll start off with that all people with autism have the same skills as well as difficulties or challenges. I'll start with Ms. Mona. What is the truth with that, Ms. Mona?
The truth is, autism, like you said, is a spectrum. In our experience, it is not even just a flat, straight line. It is a sphere. So somebody who may be very, very intelligent may have debilitating anxiety. Somebody who may not be verbal can be such a talented artist. So in fact, even the terms low functioning, high functioning is something that is deceiving because they are so different and so valid. The autism of my son is very different from how the autism manifests in, for example, the clients of Dr. Kat.
But I'd like to go to another misconception, and that is that children with autism are unruly, noisy, very aggressive, very awkward in social situations, maingay. Now, there are those with autism who may shout or hit when distressed, but this isn't the case for all. It's rare for someone with autism to intentionally cause harm to someone else or another person. Ms. Mona, why are some perceived to be as aggressive?
When somebody on the autism spectrum cannot express themselves, or they may have other conditions, like sometimes they are unable to sleep at night, or they have gut issues, masakit ang tiyan nila, syempre paggising nila, they're going to be agitated. So what we see as aggressive behaviors or sometimes unruly behaviors, especially in the classroom, is not just that. That is a manifestation of other sensory or medical issues that that person on the autism spectrum may have.
Another misconception is that people with autism aren't capable of forming meaningful relationships as well as friendships. They often have very strong bonds with important people in their lives, and they can fulfill relationships with family, friends, partners, and children. Dr. Catherine, this time, please tell us more about this. Yan ang misconception na kapag autistic ang isang tao, hindi siya makaka-form ng relationship.
Maybe the reason why people think of it as that is because they have difficulties with social emotional reciprocity. So they think if a person with autism would be approached, they would have a different way of communicating what they are thinking or their thoughts. That's why they think they couldn't form special relationships. But you are right, they do form special relationships with their loved ones. We feel that as their doctors, and also the teachers could attest to that.
But another common misconception is that people with autism have an intellectual disability. Now, some people with the condition do have this, but others have IQ within the typical range or even higher. Now, we shouldn't restrict their opportunities for education and social interactions by making assumptions about their intellectual abilities. Dr. Catherine, can you expound a little bit on this?
Recent studies would say that only 30% of children with autism would have intellectual disability. So that's a common misconception, maybe because sometimes they do not know how to respond well. So the people would think, oh, maybe they have intellectual disability because it's one of their core deficits. But no, a lot of people with autism would have high IQ. They would just have interest. They would master those interests and do good on it.
People with autism have difficulty expressing their feelings or express them differently, but they're capable of feeling the full spectrum of emotions. Ms. Mona, please explain on this concept and why this is so.
They are capable of those feelings, but they express it in a different way. So somebody who is very interested in you and wants to connect with you, for example, may start talking about their interest. They would be obsessed with a TV show, and that's all they would talk to you about. It's not about that show that they're expressing. They are expressing their interest in you, and that is their only way that they know how to connect. In terms of the feelings, they also may have difficulty in expressing it in facial expression. Sometimes they also have difficulty in understanding what the facial expression of the person in front of them is talking about. So this is something that we teach, believe it or not, in occupational therapy, in speech therapy. That is a skill that they have to acquire through intervention. But they are capable of so much emotion and so much passion.
Another common misconception or myth about autism is that it is a childhood condition that can be outgrown or cured even. Now, autism characteristics start early in life and continue through adulthood, which is why it can't be outgrown. Could you explain how they should look at this?
Autism is described as a lifelong condition. So the symptoms would change from time to time. So maybe that's why others would think that it could be outgrown. So a study done in 2020 said that around approximately 9% of those children earlier diagnosed with autism don't meet the criteria anymore by youth. So things that were found similar to those children who do not meet the criteria later on would have good cognitive skills by 2 years old and early intervention.
When we return, we'll discuss the symptoms and causes of ASD. We're your connection to healthcare. You're watching MedTalk Health Talk. ASD varies widely in symptoms and severity, so making a diagnosis may be challenging. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and you're watching MedTalk Health Talk. We're together in health. Diagnosing ASD can be challenging, even difficult, as there's no medical test to determine if they have it. Dr. Kath, with that being said, paano nadadiagnose, or how does one meet the diagnostic criteria for having autism spectrum disorder?
We base our diagnosis in DSM-5. So the core deficits are usually grouped into two. It could be social deficits in social communication and repetitive, restricted behavior, interests, or activities. The deficits in social communication would include social reciprocity, so nonverbal communicative behavior. So these are the abnormalities in eye contact or use of gestures, and maintaining and understanding relationships. Symptoms for the repetitive restricted behavior, interests, or activities would include stereotype or repetitive motor movements. That's what others would always see, the hand flapping, repetitive jumping or clapping, insistence on sameness or inflexibility to the routines, and hyper or hyposensitivities to sensory input.
Many children don't receive a diagnosis until they're much older. And this delay might cause these children to not get the early help that they need, because the symptoms of ASD will normally appear during childhood, approximately around the toddler age, which is around the 1 to 2 years old. What are some of the common signs shown by individuals with autism?
The most common that we see in clinics is language delay. So they don't get to talk on the age that we're expecting them to talk. And usually they come because of poor response to social overtures, meaning when you call them, they don't look at you. They don't turn their head. So red flags that were published include by 12 months, they does not respond to name calling. So that's also the most common symptom that we see. Second is does not point to objects to show interest. So they don't engage in joint attention. They don't tell you if they are happy or they like something. And then by 18 months, they do not pretend play.
What is your advice for parents? When should they see a doctor?
What we suggest to parents who come to us is always trust your gut. If your child, as you see them, as you observe them, is already exhibiting certain things that were not for something that you did not see in your older child, then you go to a doctor. Also, sometimes when they have cousins, you can compare. You go to a doctor. Also, if you have autism in your family, sometimes your family members can also give you guidance and, okay, that might be a red flag, let's go and check. So our advice is, when in doubt, go to your doctor.
We've been talking about children most of this time, but adults can also have ASD. And this doesn't mean that they develop the condition in adulthood. Most likely, they were unaware that they had this condition or weren't diagnosed when they were children. Ms. Mona, what are the symptoms of ASD in adults?
The reason why people get to a certain age and not be diagnosed, they have a term for it. They call it masking. If your parent tells you you're not supposed to feel that, you're not supposed to do that, then the person tries to adapt. And this happens a lot in girls. They say that girls mask better than boys. We do see a lot of adults on the autism spectrum who have not been diagnosed earlier. In my program called ASP Autism Works, we try to find employment for those who are on the spectrum. And the late diagnosis applicants that we get usually go to their psychologist or their psychiatrist for other concerns. For example, they have difficulty in holding a job or difficulty in expressing themselves to their family or to friends. So these are other issues that bring them to the professionals, and with the professional, they get the diagnosis.
But another common misconception that I'd like to point out, which I think is very important, especially in the Philippines, because maraming naniwala na autism is caused by vaccines. But do we already have an idea on what causes autism?
There is certain predisposition in developing autism. However, we don't know yet what the specific cause is. So regarding the vaccines, I think the reason why people initially believed it was because of vaccines, because the symptoms come out usually at 18 to 24 months when we give the MMR vaccine. So maybe that's why they thought it was caused by the vaccine. So predisposing factors include genetics. So based on twin studies, families who would have one person with autism would have predisposition of having another child with autism. Other predisposing conditions include preterm delivery, high-risk pregnancies. So those are the more common ones that they think of as cause of autism.
With that wide range of people falling into the diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder, how specialized can that treatment be?
So the main focus of the interventions would be to minimize the core deficit, maximize adaptive functions, and minimize the coexisting conditions when they grow up. It should be individualized, so it depends on the needs of every child.
Ms. Mona, let's talk about some of the more common challenges that adults with ASD may have.
What I see as deficits would be inability or lack of tact when they speak. So they are sometimes misunderstood in the workplace. Another one would be their lack of desire to work in a team, and they would rather work alone. They excel in solitary activities. Another thing would be the stress that they receive when you give them deadlines or when they would have to socialize. Those are factors that for the rest of us that don't really matter, but for them it gives them a high level of anxiety.
What are the basics when it comes to those with ASD? A lot of people may think that they need to have their space around them, they cannot be touched. Are these sort of misconceptions true? Do these still hold true now, or should that vary per individual?
Whenever I have sensitivity trainings, and I do this for employers, for example, you have to talk to the individual because they are so unique. Then you have to ask them, how do you want to be called? Do you get offended when I call you autistic? Is it okay for you to be touched? Do you want a little bit more space? Do you need a headset? It's the same for when they are in college and when they are at work. So all of these things matter. And the key thing here is you have to ask them, you have to talk to them, you have to be with them so that you can find out more about individuals on the autism spectrum.
Now, for many people with ASD, living with this condition is not easy. When we return, we'll talk about this and how it affects their families. Your health is our mission. This is MedTalk Health Talk. Persons living with ASD often need support from family as well as other people around them. Now, we're here to discuss how you can help people living with ASD. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and you're watching MedTalk Health Talk, where your healthcare always comes first. Dr. Catherine, what are some of the treatment management options with someone who is diagnosed with ASD?
We usually refer our patients initially for occupational therapy to work on their behavior so that the therapist could help them sit for a long time, pay attention when taught. This would also address their play and their self-help skills. So once they're okay already, we start speech therapy sessions so that they could be taught how to communicate. Also, we always emphasize that family support is very important. People in the house or the family should always support the growth of the child.
Are there tests to see if they can cope up with normal school? Dapat ba special school? Could performance in a normal school be a red flag na baka may autism ang bata?
The choice of school is dependent on the child's needs or the child's abilities. So if we see that they could comprehend, that they could answer questions, or sometimes we do academic testings in the clinic and they could do well in a regular school, then we advise them to be in a regular school. But some kids, they would have difficulties with reading comprehension. Then we suggest putting them or enrolling them in a special school.
Now, Mona, can therapy help someone with ASD function better in society?
They are very helpful in keeping a child engaged in the community. The speech therapy, occupational therapy are very important because these are pre-learning skills. But once they are older, like for now, like there's a pandemic, imagine a child on the spectrum stuck at home who cannot go out, who cannot participate in a community activity. So for the Autism Society Philippines, it has become very important. It has become a priority that we continue our non-traditional intervention by providing opportunities for them to come together on Zoom or on any other platform. It is important for them to flex those skills that they should be flexing if it were face-to-face.
Now, before we go, Dr. Kath, do you have any message for our viewers?
There is always hope in children with autism. When you have a gut feeling that something's wrong, that your child is not developing well, consult at once.
And Mona, any words to say for our viewers when it comes to ASD? And please share with them how they can get in touch with Autism Society Philippines as well.
Autism is a lifelong developmental condition. Those on the autism spectrum can live productive, meaningful lives with early intervention, unconditional love, and societal acceptance. You can go to Autism Society Philippines Facebook page, Twitter, Instagram for details. And let's join hands, cooperate in inspiring acceptance, accommodation, and appreciation for those on the autism spectrum.
This discussion was very helpful, I'm sure, for a lot of our viewers. Thank you, developmental pediatrician Dr. Catherine Baltazar Braganza and ASP National President Ms. Mona Magno-Veluz. Research continues to advance our understanding of autism, but there is still a lot more to learn. In the meantime, it's best to seek help as soon as you suspect that there is something off or something wrong. The earlier children with this disorder can get help, the greater their chances of treatment success. Stay safe, everyone. We want to be your partner for a lifetime of good health. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and this has been MedTalk Health Talk on CNN Philippines.